Ex-Muslims of Reddit, what was the last straw for you to say this is it? I'm leaving? I was born in a Muslim household and raised by Muslim parents. My parents were very religious. I left my faith because of the tremendous amount of evidence there is backing evolution. I mean, we have fossils of early humans etc. There are even some modern day animals evolving right in front of our eyes. Like elephants beginning to lose their tusks, peppered moths changing color, fence lizards evolving to suit the invading fire ants, rats evolving to suit rat poison, humans losing their wisdom teeth etc. etc. But whenever I would bring up these examples, the response that I would get would just be no, because in Islam you have to believe that God made humans perfectly and we're going to stay the same till the end of times. I didn't really think about becoming Christian or any other religion cause they all share the same basis. So that's why I left my religion, and I would like to hear from you guys on some other arguments you would make regarding evolution. Or me, the thing which bothered me most of all was the concept of give and take. As in, I should thank the Almighty God for creating me. I must pray 5 times a day, bow down before him, and I get a reward, heaven, in the end. Hell, if not, why? I mean, our parents created us, and we don't go kneeling before them thanking for bringing us to this world every now and then. Neither do they expect us to do that. So why an Almighty God, who is described as being 1,000 times more loving than our parents, should require that? Moreover, I was also promised afterlife pleasures, provided I follow a strictly written guidebook, believed to have publicized by a man of God. So, what I can concur is, this unconditional being basically says that for getting good, do good. What I mean to say is, sure, heaven and its luxuries sounds pretty good, but that should not be presented as an exchange offer for something someone else orders you to do. Assume everyone had completely free will, and no one was being judged for doing anything. And there was this person who helped others, never cheated anyone, never stole from anyone, lived a very honest life. Now, should that person go to hell for shaving off his beard, or getting a tattoo, or eating bacon? I'm first generation American, raised Muslim light, in a small town. I call it Muslim light because my father follows the basic obvious Islamic practices, but knows very little about our actual religion. In fact, he wears the badge of Muslim more as an identity than a practicing religion. I learned much more about Islam later in life by attending mosque regularly and learning from my grandfather. Growing up, I fasted each Ramadan. I didn't eat pork or drink alcohol. When I got to college, I started questioning faith. I read the Quran and the Bible. I dated, and now married, a conservative Christian woman, and we had many nights discussing and hashing out religion. It always ended up with me commenting on how ridiculous parts of it were. Today, my wife and most of my friends know I'm an atheist. I haven't told my parents, because it will hurt them a lot. I drink and eat pork now. Why did I leave? I just don't believe in God. Probably most of the reasons people normally stop believing. How the holy books posit God doesn't line up with what I see or understand of the world. The people who attend my mosque and are part of the community have always been supportive and fantastic. It's just when I search my heart and think things through logically, God makes no sense. I left because I think the lifestyle requires too much sacrifices that I'm not willing to make. I also questioned the existence of a God because there is no proof, so that made it easier to leave. My family will be crushed if they find out. Edit. Also, I thought about the bad things religion caused, holy crusades, violence, war, prejudice, so why be part of it? I'm half white and half Asian. Muslim country, doesn't really matter where. My father is a conservative Muslim and my mother is an atheist. They split when I was little, but agreed none of them would try to influence me. My father is full of bullshit. I lived with my mother first, then moved to my father at 15. Dumbest decision I ever made. His need to micromanage every little thing in my life made us fall out. I later moved back to my mom after I found out what a shit person he wasn't just small stuff. He got a restraining order. I wasn't the best Muslim, but I believed. Couple of years later I did my first acid trip and thought through it all, realizing just how silly it was. I think this about all religions now. The way to become a heathen was short from there. I was in 7th grade when I quit. I found out I was attracted to both males and females, and then I started questioning the existence of a god without feeling as guilty as I used to. Eventually I realized it didn't make sense, but I'd hold on to it. I ended up getting a boyfriend and realized not being able to date/do anything with someone before marriage was stupid, and I decided it was something I didn't believe in at all anymore. Ultimately, the reasons I stopped believing were really minor. Now I have a lot more, but those were what made sense to my 12-year-old mind. Same reason most people leave any religion. I don't believe in God, or at least I don't believe there's any reason to think I could know if there was a god, and until there is I don't see why I'd believe in it. I was raised in a Muslim household, so I didn't question it at first, but once I was old enough I realized I didn't have much reason to believe in religion. All Muslims I knew were very kind and welcoming, and I actually really miss going to a mosque and being surrounded by so many friendly people. To be honest, out in public, if you keep your opinions to yourself and be a nice enough person, you shouldn't get into any trouble and everything should be fine. Personally, being an atheist in Tunisia, I had no issues with anyone, even though I had only one friend who is atheist. Though it's definitely an absolute hell if your family are extremists who will happily disown you on the spot if they knew, if they felt merciful and didn't beat you to death. So you have to pretend to have some faith and fast and pray and do all that shit, and yet still get criticized if you falter. And even though I live in an European country now, I still have the same issues I had in Tunisia. So I guess, if you are an ex-Muslim and your family is 100% against it, that's your biggest issue, no matter where you are. Ever since I quit, people won't stop asking how my life is as an ex. Well, everyday life is actually almost normal. My sister and little brother know about my atheism, all of my good friends too. My parents kinda know, even though we never explicitly talked about it. I just once had an extremely awkward conversation with my dad which ended with my dad saying, "It's not important to believe in a seven adith and so, but you do believe in God, right?" And then came a very awkward silence. I couldn't lie, but couldn't tell the truth either. I guess he knows now. To my surprise, it changed nothing about our relationship. It used to stress me a lot when I had to lie about fasting and why I don't pray when I'm talking with relatives. But now it's okay, and sometimes it's even kinda funny. Last time I was visiting relatives, a cousin of mine went on with the usual, "How did you keep up the work during Ramadan in this hot season?" I, of course, had to lie pretending to belong. But my little brother was standing next to us, and he was like, "Yeah, my sister is very strong believer, you trying not to choke on the bullshit." Like, yeah, right. It felt like an indirect act of support. It felt good. I quit Islam since I was a teenager. Ramadan used to be hard because I used to smoke, but without the smoking it's easy. It does make me angry that we can't go out and drink and have a party, but I like the Ramadan atmosphere and I really enjoy that month. For the family and friends part, I used to read a lot about Islam and always dig deep and always read the Quran and never miss a chance to make a debate and talk about it. Funny thing is that in situation when I can only be a Muslim, I appear as a strong believer who knows a lot of Quran. So yeah, I was honest about my family reaction was not about rejection and hate, you are no longer part of us and all that drama, but I noticed that I give them pain knowing that their son will burn in hell, so backed off and starting to make it look like that I was just Titsor and now I'm a believer. Also, I no longer engage in religion debates. I got sick of it unless it's an interesting conversation that can lead somewhere. I realized at 25 I was supposed to get married to this guy. We've been dating for a few years, but he was religious. I looked at him and the life he wanted us to lead, and I knew that I would be making the biggest mistake of my life. I ended things with him, and to this day I know I made the best decision of my life. After the breakup, I started questioning why I didn't want the life my ex was trying to sell me. I reflected on why I wasn't happy about being a good Muslim wife. Wasn't this something I was raised to want my whole life? I realized, although my mother has been taking me to Quran class all my life, I never critically thought about what I was learning. Memories of my childhood came flooding back, like the time I asked the Imam why there weren't any black prophets or prophets who were women. The Sharia inheritance laws made no sense to me, and the part about having a male miram with me when I traveled boggled my mind. Because I didn't have a father or brothers, I found it unfair. The stories of the prophet on a horse seemed ridiculous, and stories of parents pushing their kids on judgment day, each person trying to selfishly get to heaven, left a bad taste in my mouth. Everything we value in life, such as courage and bravery, seems to not matter in Islam if it's not for the defense of Allah. Standing up for love, LGBT rights gets you to hell in Islam, which makes no sense. Little girls being sexualized and made to cover makes me sick to my stomach. The more I tried to get close to the deen, the more repulsed I became. After all, it's been 6 years now I have been agnostic, and I never once questioned why I left Islam. I'm from the US, and I had a bad upbringing. Parents were abusive shit, and Allah never answered my duas. I got angry at first, but was like, this must be a test, so I humbled myself for a while, and was so sincere. Nothing changed. In fact, my problems got worse. Shit is different now. I live my own life minus the Muslim BS. My initial disillusion with Islam was the scientific inaccuracies present within the religious text. For instance, then he ordained them 7 heavens in 2 days, and inspired in each heaven its mandate, and we decked the nether heaven with lamps, and rendered it inviolable. That is the measuring of the mighty, the Noah. Quran 41:12. Why would religious texts which have been brought forwards from a divine being be falsifiable? Other scientific disputes being that Islamic literature does not agree with the idea that humans and primates do not share a common ancestor. The evidence for evolution is insurmountable. If you were to critically decipher these religious texts, you would come across a lot questionable verses. I have, however, looked at religion a lot more fondly in the recent years. It most definitely serves a purpose, where people can rest their hopes, dreams and a sense of community, all attributes which are like, and which Islam can provide, but unfortunately at the expense of critical thought and theological reasoning. I'm of Southeast Asian origin. I simply lost faith about 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. I think the root cause may have been that I was tired of praying to God to ask him for favors. I wanted to take responsibility for my own life. I wasn't only giving up Islam, I was giving up the whole idea of God and religion. I wanted to be an independent entity who could do what he wanted and not have to follow so many rules as laid down by scripture. Leaving Islam wasn't easy. I deliberated on it for a while and went about on a fact-finding mission. The last nail in the coffin was when I learned about how the prophet had decreed that apostasy should be punished by death. That's when I knew that Islam wasn't the true religion that I had thought it to be since I was small. At the beginning I decided I was going to be an atheist. However, that changed soon when I realized that atheism is again an assumption of the unknown, and I became an agnostic. That was after I had educated myself. I read about science, history, psychology, and was very thirsty for knowledge. I was in this confused state ever since I was in middle school. I wanted to make my parents happy, so I tried to make sense of Islam, but I had a lot of unanswered questions. Like, how does free will exist when God has written our destiny already? And if God has written our final destination, either to heaven or hell, how are we responsible for the actions we do? I told my mom I had a lot of unanswered questions about Islam, and she forced me to look for answers with the hope that I would come back to Islam. So I did, and I was speaking to this sheikh via email asking him questions. In this one email, he mentioned that if we have all the answer to our questions about Islam, it would be an imperfect religion. This felt like his way of shutting me down. It came to the point where I had to be honest with myself and ask myself the question of why am I a Muslim? The answer to that question was because of my parents, so I decided to become an ex-Muslim in the closet. Bangladeshi, 22. Came to the US when I was 4. I always had a natural tendency to question, but my conservative parents used to tell me to not ask questions because it's sinful and that I'm too young to understand. They would monitor the things I read or watched on TV. They set up a controlling environment to try and shield me from Western ideals. I did become trapped because I was convinced that my parents were doing it for my own good. Luckily, science/history pulled me out of that. When I realized that humans came around only 5 to 7 million years ago, out of a 13 billion year old universe, it gave me a new perspective. How come the first humans used their brains and cognitive thinking to advance, and there was no sign of religion? Why is that religion came around when conflicts started to rise amongst a growing human population? Why is that religion is causing conflict now? I realized that the purpose of religion was to create order amongst populations and fear of the unknown. What comes after death was used to convince people to follow religion. I see it as simply a rule book that followers now use as an easily accessible means to get through the hardships of life. Focusing on what comes after life is an easy way to ignore the present life. Also, Bangladeshi Muslims practice Islamic culture, not the religion. They follow some things in the Quran as they see fit. How convenient. Bangladeshi, 23. I was born there and came to the US at the age of 2. Realized practicing, praying, eating halal and reading the Quran brought me no beneficial substance into my life other than a waste of time. My parents are religious, especially my mother as she wears the hijab. I don't agree with many things in the Quran as I've read it in English and it sounds completely far-fetched and like utter BS to me. I respect people that have faith in God/Allah and religion, but when the shoe is on the other foot, I'm scrutinized and told I'll be going to hell until the end of time. LMAO. I don't agree with the degradation people feel when they don't actively follow the religion, or the extreme hatred people feel if they are part of the LGBTQ community. I have found no peace with covering every inch of my body. I have found no peace in reading the Quran. I have found no peace praying 5 times a day. I have found peace in being a great person and having a good heart. I found peace in making people laugh, making friends of all different backgrounds, and wearing whatever I wanted, and feeling like I belong. Well, my story is nothing like yours, and it is not about quitting, but rather choosing what to do with it. I grew up with both Shia and Sunni Muslims. I was Shia myself. As I got older, my Shia circle was so full of resentment towards Sunnis, and my Sunni circle were the same towards us, Shias. So much hostility amongst both groups on issues from 1500 years ago. Even today there is no unity. So around 13 years old, I was like, nah, I'm good. I was lucky enough that my parents always taught me to be a good person first, so they don't really give me shit about not praying or fasting. Now I only go to masjids for weddings or funerals. Only thing I follow really is zakat. I donate funds to shelters or causes every 4 months with whatever money I can spare.